No Pressure podcast. Bill?
Well, hello.
I intentionally did not wear a hat today.
No, why's that?
I wear hats a lot just to cover up my challenging hair situation. But this, I would like to give a big special thanks, a big shout out to the state of Indiana for providing me with a haircut and a nice meal in a restaurant yesterday.
Wow. Does that feel weird?
It was weird. Very weird. I drove down there because my wife has been buying some stuff on the internet, some different items, some products, high quality products, and they don't fit right. So she's been sitting on this list, this big thing of returns, and so like Target, the malls, all that's open in Indiana, which is only for people who are not familiar with where I live. I live close to Grand Rapids, south of town here, southwest of Grand Rapids. So Indiana is only like an hour, where we went was like an hour and a half away.
Wow, that's not bad.
No, Mishawaka.
Down South Bend area.
Yeah. And so using the Great Clips app, no, we're not sponsored by Great Clips, but using their app, you can check in. So as I'm driving down, when I'm like after an hour, I think it kicks you out. But when I was within an hour of the Great Clips salon, I checked in, walked in, got a haircut, nothing. It was not a big deal. Went next door to the Starbucks and got a cup of coffee.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, but in all fairness, Starbucks did not let me sit in their restaurant. They served me from the window. Like they had a little window there, but everything else was pretty much normal.
Wow.
The restaurant was half capacity, so that was kind of
that's
kind of
cool.
weird.
So you didn't have to watch what you said. You just have whatever conversation you want and not have to worry about your neighbor listening in.
Exactly. But
I would kind of like that.
But big shout out to Mishawaka in Indiana.
Yeah.
I was very happy that I felt normal for a day, and
That's
so
a neat area of Indiana too.
It's a very unique area, unique New York. Now, if you would like to see my haircut, you can log on to our YouTube channel and check out my haircut there. It's really nice. I get a number 2 faded, squared up, and then point cut the top. I do the best I can, Bill.
You do good.
I do okay. And I'm even wearing the red headphones, which shows that little balding area a little better than others. But either way, it's good. Bill, you went out fishing.
I did.
How'd you do, man?
That was fun. That was my first trout on a line. Thanks to you, handing me your rod.
First time you caught a trout?
Yeah.
That was really cool, man.
When I was like 3 or 4, my dad handed me a rod. Like, here you go, son. And there's a trout on it.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
He just caught it and handed it over, and I pulled it in. So, yeah, you didn't do that, right? That was a real.
No, but today we're talking to John Dietsch, who was head of all fly fishing on the movie A River Runs Through It. And he talks about how they, whenever Brad Pitt hooked into a fish, it was never a real fish. And he's going to share some of the secrets on how they made it look like he was hooked into a fish.
Interesting.
It's very interesting. It's a very cool, very cool conversation. But, I tied up your 3-weight, and I was like, I'm going to try some of these dry flies on your 3-weight. And I don't normally use a 3-weight. I use a 9'5" weight, or my trout rod's like a 4.5 weight. But I used that 3-weight, and I hooked into a big brown, and it felt like a steelhead.
Right off the bat. Wasn't that your first cast?
It was my first cast because they were rising, and I'm like, I'm going to just toss just a BWO over in that direction. Boom! He hit it right away.
Yeah.
It felt like a steelhead because it was on that tiny little 3-weight. Oh my gosh! And it was a decent sized trout.
Aren't those fun? Those 3-weights?
Oh, dude, I got to get me one. And Chris Barclay and some of my buddies down there, they are always talking about these small rods, these lightweight rods, and I swear by them now. I'm gonna have to get one of those. So how are you liking it? It's the Reddington, right?
Yep, that's right. I love it. I took it out Friday. I went down to a little lake south of town here, and took my wife kayaking for the first time. Got both kayaks out of the water and hooked into a couple little bluegill, and they just make it fun.
Did you? Does your wife? How did she do with the whole thing with kayaking? It was her first time kayaking.
She was a little nervous. She didn't know how tippy it'd be, and it really isn't that bad on my kayaks. My kayaks are like really stable.
Yeah, they're big.
They're big.
Wide.
They're heavy, but they're very buoyant. You can like rock on it, and you totally feel safe.
Oh wow, yeah, it's I enjoy the kayaks better than a canoe.
Yeah, same.
When my wife and I were dating, I think I've told this story on the podcast before. We actually went out to we actually went out to a river here in Michigan. I think it was the PM, and we rented a kayak. And my wife had never really done that too much. And within like the first 2 minutes, we jumped over, and we were dating at the time.
In a kayak or a canoe?
Canoe.
Okay.
Within like the first 2 minutes, and
yeah,
I really thought we were going to break up that day, Bill.
Oh man,
one of those. So if you're dating someone. You don't know if things are going to work out or not. You want to really know their personality. Take them for a canoe ride. Dump it over in the water. And we've been married over 15 years now, and we survived.
I went canoeing with my dad probably mid-90s up on the Manistee, and I was having a blast until we tipped it. And then I've not been in a canoe since.
Oh, my God.
Not that I just like canoeing. It's just I haven't had a chance, and it doesn't sound as much fun as my kayak does. Ever since that, 'cause it was so tippy.
Right. Very, very tippy. I don't like canoes. I'm not good with that. So, anyways, in other news, Bill, did you know that you can get 5 years in prison for selling llama poop?
I did know that. No, I just saw that on the screen.
Yeah.
So I really didn't know that.
As many people know, I'll put this up. You can get 5 years in prison for selling llama poop and other ludicrous laws. As most of you know, I'm a big fan of Reason magazine. I'm a libertarian. And
a fan of llama poop.
And I almost started a llama poop business, but because of this particular article, I'm going to refrain. But I'm going to post that up on.
In what country though?
In the United States, actually.
Oh, is that federal? Is it a federal crime? Or
yes, it is a federal crime. And basically, this whole article and video basically shows you there's so many different crimes on the books that no matter what, you can get pulled over for probable cause. You can get arrested. They can find something to get you on because there's so many dumb rules that are just don't make sense or they're old. You probably read those articles where like, I
can't water your horse on Main Street or something dumb like that.
Yeah. There's always these rules that are there. And like, for instance, if a police officer follows you for long enough, you can do something. In some states, there's something that you didn't do, like your tires have to be inflated to a certain weight.
Yep.
I don't know if your tires are, there's a reason to pull you over. So we'll post that up. The llama poop thing really, I thought was pretty funny. But anyway, have you ever been pulled over for no reason at all, or has it always been like a reasonable cause?
Reasonable cause, speeding. I've never gotten a speeding ticket, but I've been pulled over for like 2-3 times.
Coming back from up north?
No, just driving around up north.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of seatbelt tickets in my early 20s.
Just didn't want to wear it, or
couple of drinking and driving pullovers, but just one ticket out of that. I just didn't want to wear a seatbelt back then.
Do you wear one now?
50-50.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a pro seatbelt guy. I don't think the government should enforce it.
Yes, I agree.
But I am a pro.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've seen a lot of accidents too. I've seen people killed in car accidents, and it makes you think that maybe I should start wearing this more. But then again, I jump in the car and I'm like, oh, I'm in a hurry. I got to get to work. I don't even think about putting a seatbelt on until you get that ding, ding, ding halfway down the road, and I just turn the music up.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you hear your engine knocking, just turn the music up. That'll fix it.
Yeah, this will go away. There we go.
Oh man, no, but I was in that bad car accident when I was a kid, and I had a seatbelt on. And in 1991, that was not a law. The kids I didn't have to have a seatbelt on, but it saved my life. So I'm like,
yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just don't think I should get a ticket for it.
No, exactly.
My body, my choice kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Well, this week on the Remote No Pressure podcast, and next week, it's going to be a 2-part series with author John Dietsch. John Dietsch was head of all fly fishing for the film A River Runs Through It. He has a new book out called Graced by Waters, personal essays on fly fishing and the transformative power of nature. And it's really good to hear his perspective. He's like one of us. He's a seeker. He's someone who loves the outdoors. He loves fly fishing. He was the head dude on the film. So he talks a lot in this interview about the film. This first part's more about the film and his role there with Robert Redford. And have you seen the movie, Bill?
Yeah, River Runs Through It. That was Brad Pitt, I thought.
Right. Brad Pitt. Yep.
Yeah.
But Robert Redford produced it.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I like Redford.
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to via this podcast who started fly fishing because of this film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they see it and they're like, "That's so cool." You know, I tried to watch it with I tried to watch it with my kids because they got it for Christmas a couple years ago. There's a lot of swearing in it. I was really surprised. I didn't end up watching it with them, but the film is.
They learn any new words?
No, actually, my son. I took him out to the Flat River a couple years back, and he's like, "Dad, what does that word mean?" And it was the F word, and so he learned that from some bozo who spray painted it underneath the
bridge there.
The bridge there. Oh, yeah. So
sorry about that. I thought I was being funny.
I didn't think anybody would see it. There.
You got to be on the water to appreciate this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But John's a great guy. We got to know each other pretty well. It's a long interview, so we're going to split this up into 2 episodes. This first episode is more about the what he did there with the film. The next episode is about the spiritual connection to waters and the natural world with his book, Grace by Waters. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm very excited to have John Dietsch on the horn with us. Thank you very much for hanging out with us, John.
Hey, thank you. I'm really excited to be on your show, Jeff.
It's really a pleasure. It's an honor to have you on. I'm always happy when we have guests on and people that are willing to give us a little time. I'm always grateful for that. Now, some people may not know who you are, so we'll start out with a little bit. I received your book from the publicist, from Meredith. She sent it over to me. Well, the PDF version. I haven't quite got the other one yet. Graced by Waters. But before you got into writing, you were involved in the movies a little bit, correct?
That is correct. Yes, I've been involved in entertainment and television and films for. I don't even want to say how long because then I'll give away my age. But it's been at least 3.5 decades that I've been doing this.
One of your most famous roles was essentially Brad Pitt's body double / stuntman. Am I correct?
Well, I think in the fly fishing world, that's definitely, it was one of those situations where I was put in charge of all the fly fishing scenes. I was the department head for all the fly fishing scenes in the film A River Runs Through It because I'm both a producer and a writer and a fly fisherman, and I guide part-time, and I have since 1984 out of Aspen, Colorado. And so, yeah, I got hired on that film, and it's sort of been, I don't know if you remember Bob Denver from Gilligan's Island.
Sure, absolutely.
Not to denigrate myself, but it's just I can't quite get away from the fact that I was, in charge of all those fly fishing scenes. And while I'm flattered, it's like everyone knows Bob Denver for doing, Gilligan's Island, right? But hopefully, I think that's part of why I wrote the book is that, I am a writer, and really, of all things, I think that's what I am as a writer. And I have, for, like I said, almost 35 years, been writing for television. And I did some prose back in 2000 with a partner, but it was really based on this ESPN. It was a CD-ROM of videos that we did when the first technology that combined computers and video came out in 1995. It was called the ESPN Interactive Fly Fishing School. And I had the rights to those scripts. So we created a book out of those, and it was how-to, and I did some prose, and there were short stories, 3 or 4 of which are in my new book as well, rewritten. So I love both the lyricism of fly fishing and fly fishing itself, and it just, I think it's one of the most literary sports that there is on the planet, and I've heard that before, and certainly if you look at all the content on Amazon and in terms of video content and stuff, it's just it's endless. And I think your podcast is really sort of in that vein. I love your podcast, and you and I were talking sort of before we started recording about how similar our paths are. It seems like, and so many of us, I think, in fly fishing have found that. But yeah, I think that there's a spiritual aspect to this sport as well, and that's really what I set out to do when I wrote the book, is to sort of share some of those experiences that I've had, and the fact that I was standing in the wading boots of Norman McLean. He had said before filming that that he wanted to be in charge of the fly fishing scenes, and I was so young at 29. I just didn't really realize what I was doing.
Right.
And it took a village to make that film, no question. But it was really, the buck stopped with me. And then after me it was Redford and Patrick Markey, who were the producers. And it was a big job, and it was at such a young age. It was just something that didn't really dawn on me what had been gifted to me. And that's sort of what I think that is the book, is sort of understanding, Great with Grace by Waters, really what a gift it is to be on the water. And the last 2 months, I have not been able to access our beach here, where I fish quite a bit, with my fly rod. And I have self-diagnosed, and it's in the book, with myself with something I call nature deficit disorder. If I'm not out in nature, with a fly rod in particular, near water, I get depressed. And in the last 2 months have been probably the most difficult 8 weeks that I can recall in a long, long time, because we've closed the beach, and then also the mountains behind me. I live in Pacific Palisades, California, and it's been tough. It's been tough, and I know it's not just me; it's everybody, because there's just so much loss of what we had. And it's interesting because the book is really about that. It really, in fact, the way I describe the book is that that it explores our connection to the outdoors through the prism of fly fishing, and investigates its transformative and healing power in the face of loss. And I wrote that, and I wrote the book, obviously, but wrote that description of the book well before the pandemic. And then suddenly this thing descended on us, and I think that there is a transformative opportunity here for the earth, for humans in particular. And when you step back and you look at what has been happening to nature all over the world, our ecosystems are finally finding they're clicking at a much higher vibrance. Everything seems to be cleaner, and the animals seem to be roaming more, coming into places that they've never come in before because of humans. And when we stopped, in essence, we've paused. The earth is showing us, as our mother, in a way, really not even in a way. I look at the earth as our mother, is how we're supposed to live with nature, not trying to conquer it all the time. And I have that dichotomy. I had it today when I went fishing. Again, the beaches have been closed for 2 months. I went down there; they were pristine. I'd never seen the water look like that. And I got into a fish. I landed it, and and I had that I get called my ego. It was triggered, and it was like, oh, it's fish. And I knew there's a school in, and I let the fish go, and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not going to cast anymore. And this is how I think I've changed as a fisherman, and because there's an addictive quality to that. And rather than going and see if I can get another one, and I know how it was called a yellowfin croaker, and they pod up, and they're very aggressive, and they come in, and they're only there for a short period of time, so you can catch 2 or 3 in a row typically. And I just decided, you know what, I'm so grateful. I'm going to get emotional here, to be back on my beach, to have access to it, and I want to just sort of show that gratitude by sitting down, and I just meditated. I put the rod in my lap, and I walked back, and I put the rod in my lap and sat down, and I just closed my eyes and just listened to that sound of water. And I think that sometimes we don't really, as fly fishermen, I know that we all appreciate that, but to me, it's really the essence of it. I'll watch videos and there'll be all these beautiful shots of nature and water and then it starts to get into the guys catching the fish, and it's just like, oh, I was really digging the nature stuff.
Right.
Not that I don't look, and this is look, I love to catch fish as much as the next guy, and it's a goal, and it's I like to know, I was using what we call a merkin, and I tie those up, and so it's nice to catch a fly on a pattern that you either tie or that that you're sort of digging out of your box to find something that would love that. But when I just sit back and I realize how lucky I am to be here on the planet and to be part of the ecosystem, that's really for me what fly fishing is all about.
Do you have like a mic on or something, or a headset or something? I keep hearing like a scraping sound. I don't know.
Yeah,
what it's
that is. That's my bandana mask that I have to wear here in California. So let me take that off because I was wearing it when I was fishing.
Okay, no problem.
That is hilarious. Yeah, I mean, so last night when they opened the beaches, they also require that once you walk out of the door that you're supposed to have a mask on.
Wow.
And of course I use one when I, for sun protection anyhow, but
yeah.
I just got off the water. So it was still around my neck. So I'm sorry about that.
I was going to edit that out, but I guess I'm going to leave it because that's a really cool story. So.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. How times have changed. Now I'd be the one guy with the bandana, and now everyone else has them too.
Well, it is interesting. One of the things that, well, first of all, when I read in the beginning of your book, you actually quoted from the book Last Child in the Woods. Yes. I was like, I love that book. It's one of my favorite books. So I knew that we were kindred spirits at that point. But in the intro, I think if I'm not mistaken, I read something about St. Louis. Am I right?
No, I don't think so.
No, St. Louis, Missouri. You had picked someone up. Am I crazy?
Oh, that's the foreword. Yeah.
Oh,
that's the foreword. It was written by Paul Vanderbeller, who is a Pulitzer Prize nominated author, amazing author. Yeah, that was a story that he wrote when he used to live in Missoula.
Okay.
As one of the vagabond writers of the time.
I love it, and it's funny because, the reason I ask you that is because I had an existential crisis in St. Louis, Missouri. My buddy Chris Barclay, who makes custom fiberglass fly rods, he was in St. Louis, Missouri, and it is the gateway to the West. So it would have made a very romantic story if the whole thing started there. But unfortunately, I read the thing incorrectly. But that's okay. So, tell us a little bit about, we'll start with the movie part. When you're on the set, did anyone understand how big this movie was going to be? Or was it just kind of like, hey, this is another script, another story? Or during production, were you guys like, holy crap, this is going to be a huge movie?
Well, I think that the way for me to answer that question is to say, first and foremost, the responsibility for me as the person who was, a film person, a person who was familiar with filmmaking and had made a bunch of projects, not nearly as many as, of course, now, but I was still young. But I had a familiarity with film and television, and that was my career path that I've been doing for, I don't know, let's call it 7 or 8 years. But I'd also been a guide, and I think at the time I was even guiding part time. But when they brought me in, and that's a whole story in itself. I knew that we had to get it right. They knew they had to get it right, mm-hmm. And one of the first things we did was to reach out to all the brands, many of which I knew just from being around and being a guide, and finding the right people to surround ourselves with to make sure that we would do it right. And I think that was what was so interesting about Patrick and Bob, is that they they knew that they had to bring in the fly fishing industry and to surround ourselves with people in the industry and not to charge people like what they would do today. Not Bob and Patrick, but the industry in general with this whole idea of integrating products into films and such. So no one was charged. And I think that the industry really appreciated that. And they saw the film, people saw the film and understood, what we had done and the kind of care we had taken to really try to make it as authentic as possible, which is very hard, by the way, when you have such a giant crew of, let's call it 150 people, some days 200, and you have to move quickly. And, just for the record, none of those fish were actually caught, in real time. That's an impossibility. We had to really think through how we would do that. And when I got hired, we had no idea what we were going to do. We thought maybe we'd use a tank. There are some very famous cinematographers who do tank work. And we looked at that and it was just too expensive. And so we came up with some ideas that really were borrowed from guys like Gary Borger and Fishing the West. I can't recall at the moment the gentleman who did that, but the people who had sort of already made these fly fishing television shows and videos, in the case of Gary. And in fact, one of the things that we did use from Gary, who I knew, I didn't know Gary personally, but I knew his work at the time. And so I called him, and that's how Jason Borger got on board, was he was actually initially hired as my assistant. And it turns out that Jason was really good with artwork. So he ended up drawing out the scenes the way that I had seen them based on the talks I had with Redford. And then we would go and work with Bob. And so, he delegated a lot of this to me, which was amazing. And it was just an incredible experience. Still to this day, probably the most incredible experience I've had in the industry in terms of film and fly fishing, right?
Wow.
But going back to the responsibility part of it, it was amazing because the first set of storyboards that had been drawn up by someone in Los Angeles when I got on board was drawn. It was drawn with a guy with a tackle box and with spinning rods.
Oh no!
Yeah. Now, it was a quick sketch, and the guy that did it didn't know the difference between a fly rod and a spinning rod. So that just gives you an idea of what I was up against. There was language in that didn't quite work, and again, I brought in as many guys as I could to John Bailey, Gary Borger, and his son. We brought in the Federation of Fly Fishers, which was what it was called at the time. Mm-hmm. The TU folks up there. In fact, Jim, I think his name was Jim Belfry. Again, just through personal connections and such, he picked us up on a scout, called me right before the scout and said, "John, have you looked out your window? It had snowed 3 feet in Bozeman." It was in March. And he's like, "I assume we're not doing this." And Patrick had said, "We're going to do it no matter what." So we went out in a 4-wheel drive Suburban with nobody on the road, and they hadn't plowed much. So it was literally like 1.5 feet of snow. And we were able to get through it and went up and we scouted the Gallatin River and actually found the spot that we ended up using on that morning. So there's a bunch of stories like that are indelibly etched in my mind because of the fact that, like you said, this became such a classic. And of course, when I guess going back to your original question, Jeff, when you're in the moment, you're just trying to do the best you can, mm-hmm. and thinking ahead about the result. And it's a lot of my book too. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve me to be thinking, "Oh my God, what this thing is." We just got to get it as best we can,
right?
Do the best job we could. And we came up with ideas like, I was looking at these actors, and again, this may have been something that John Bailey and I came up together. There's no, I don't have any ego in how, who did what. It was just a team effort. But the actors were not fly fishermen. I actually took Brad Pitt out in L.A., in Santa Monica, out to these ponds that had no water in them. They were because at that time it was one of the droughts, and so there was no water. It was just concrete, and so we were casting a line. And two things happened that day. One was that Brad saw me messing around. I was kind of showing off with like a pendulum cast or in a reverse cast, and he's like, "Oh, the shadow cast," and that was really how we ended up sort of coming up with that idea for the shadow cast. George Kunenberg, who was the guy who tied the flies in the book A River Runs Through the novella, was not sure what that really meant, the shadow cast. And we tried to find out. Everyone had a different interpretation. So that's how we ended up coming up with that idea for that shadow cast initially. The other thing was funny is because there was no water, these little kids were running around, and there was about a 4 or 5 year old kid. I turned to Brad and I said, "Brad, you want to know what it's like to catch fish and play it?" He goes, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I gave the end of the line to this 4-year-old kid, and he started running around. And that's how Brad learned how to play a fish. And then later on, we went up. We didn't have a lot of time with the actors. We just got in 15 minutes here and a half hour there. And one time I did go up to Malibu State Park with both Craig Sheffer, who played the part of Norman, and Brad, just to show him how to wade and sort of walk around and did some casting on water and stuff, so we could show him the roll cast and stuff like that. But when we got up there, it was hard to find the time. So one time I think we had a half an hour with Brad, and we were at one of the stock ponds where we got those big fish you see in the film, and we threw out some grain pellets and handed him the rod with a little hair's ear on it. He had a pretty decent cast that by that time he cast it out and boom, this fish hit it, and he actually got to play it. So before he actually went out in the river and we faked all that stuff, which by the way we did, all that stuff was in essence faked. It's all cuts, and we used bottles filled with. I'm going to destroy it for everybody. Filled with sand and dirt and rocks, and you got to get it so it's just below the water. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the most famous thing that I did on that film was coming up with the idea at the end of the film where he swims the rapid. I don't know if you remember that scene.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was something that it's in my book too. It's really a story about what do we call it? Just serendipity, really. I had laid out all the scenes. I think we did 4 major fly fishing scenes, and the last one I did not. He didn't ask me the finale scene where the brother in the book catches a beautiful fish, a big fish, and they watch him, and then after he catches the fish and he puts it in his creel, he has to make a decision of crossing, and it's fairly dangerous. And he goes across, in it's sort of a dangerous part of water, and he sinks down for a split second, as I recall. And it's really a foreshadowing of the character's death, of Norman's brother's passing, which happens just after that scene. And Redford wanted something more dramatic, so we're sitting down, going over all the fly fishing scenes, and he said, "Do you have any ideas for it?" Well, there's an old adage in production, which is that do what you need to do, and then if you step on someone's toes, apologize. And Redford asked if I had any ideas, and I remember Patrick Markey, the producer, because Redford was a director, kind of looking at me like staring a hole into my head. And this idea popped into my head, and I pitched it to Redford, so in first person, saying, actually third person in terms of the character. And I went through that whole scene, in terms of, and I just came to me of, there would be a big fish in a pocket at the top of this rapid. And he would try to get up on the eddy line as far out into the rapid as he possibly could, to get a cast out, over that fast water into the slow water as best he could, possibly with a mend, which by the way never made the film, which has always been something I wish we had done, but it wasn't in there. And anyway, that was the idea: is he would get out. He wouldn't need a mend really, but just to get out and just long enough, because he figured out he couldn't get a drift unless he really pushed it. So he's right up against that rapid, and the fish comes up and eats the fly, and then takes off down the river. And he has to make a decision, maybe. And then I think I was then you see his feet, slipping under the water, and yeah, exactly. And that's what Redford was doing, I kept going. I was like, wow, he likes this, right? And then the fish, and then the fish takes off down the river, and then I stopped. And said, then he decides. Then I said, he decides to go in the river and swim with the fish, right? And then he's fishing. He's going down the river fishing with the fish. And I stopped because I didn't know where it was going to go. Right. He's going to catch the fish. So I stopped, and it was there was 2 seconds. It was like 1, 2, and then Redford goes, and then what? And I knew I had him. It was like I knew it was like up fish on. So it was funny because what ended up happening is we never really did have an ending for that scene. I ended up having to do that scene, and I got Taft-Hartley'd into the union, and was Brad Pitt's stunt double. For that scene, and actually swam that rapid 5 times. I thought I would do it once. Philippe Rousselot, I've told this story before, but he's French, and he says, Jean, I've done the Berre in the Alps, and I've done the Emerald Forest down in the Amazon. Those were 2 Academy Award-winning films. And I want you to know I've never killed into one. No, are you going to die? And he said to me, are you going to die? And I said, Philly, I just laughed. He's a funny guy. I said, no, I'm going to be fine. He goes, okay, we do it 5 times. So I ended up doing it 5 times. And the first time I did it, I was so nervous that I aimed right for the camera, right? And went right underneath the camera. And I thought at the end, I just nailed it. And then I look upstream, and here's Philippe coming down at me, just pissed as hell. Because he knew I wasn't listening to him, and he had told me to go, 10 feet out in front. So he had everything all focused, for 10 feet, not underneath the frickin' camera. So I did it again, and the second time, Jerry Seam, who's now the rod designer at Sage, who was working for Winston at the time, he put the bottle in the water, and it got stuck. And I think I had 40, 50-pound tests on that line, maybe even more. And it just ripped out of my hands in the second take. I was right there where he wanted me. But, all of a sudden the rod comes out of my hands, and I went down that river, and I hit this wave, and it sunk me down. It literally sucked, because now I'm way out into the middle of the river because it swung me around, because I was holding on to the rod for a few seconds. And I was off my line. And, I also kayak and raft, so I know whitewater, and I just was right in this hydraulic, and it went into this hydraulic, and it sucked me under and kept me under for a couple seconds. And what happened in the edit was that they saw that, and they're like, what if we go back? And they actually went back with Jason Borger, who did some of the pickups there, and we have it so that John's going down the river, and then as Brad, so Brad's going down the river, and then he gets sucked under, and then we go back and we see the characters on the Norman character and his son looking out at the river, and we see nothing. So we shot that point of view, which is called a POV shot, looking at the river in the falls. The river's actually a lot lower. You can check it out and you can see that, and then it cut well and made it really super dramatic. And to this day, it's maybe it's my claim to fame. So, and I'm trying to change that with this book, with Grace by Waters. It's although the book does have something to do with the theme of the film, which is loss. I've lost both my brothers, and one of them actually was named Paul, as was Norman's brother. And I have always had this affinity for water in a very, very special way, in a way that is just, I'd say it doesn't make sense, but it makes total sense. I mentioned serendipity. I don't think it was an accident that I ended up in the role in the film that I ended up with.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Be sure to check out the links below for John Dietsch album book called Graced by Water's Personal Essays of Fly Fishing and Transformative Power of Nature. Mm-hmm. Has it been transformative to you, Bill? Has today been transformative to you on the podcast?
Today's been a good day so far, yeah. So I would say nearly transformative.
Nearly transformative. Nearly transformative. Well, I hope we're always transformative here on the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at remotenopressure.com. Check out our COVID/Sasquatch buffs that are on sale for $5 right now. Thank you guys.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Did you already say that?
Yeah, I said that.
Oh,
subscribe to the
I was
YouTube
zoning
channel.
out.
You were zoning out. It's all the nicotine. But but thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. And until next time, go fishing.